I think that immigrants, how to be a good immigrant into a new country is to come there for the purpose to make that country a better place.
Right.
So if you're coming there to live in our territory, then you're coming there to make our territory and our country better. As opposed to coming there to have a better life for yourself, because that's not a good immigrant. That's a colonist, right? It's coming there to establish their own thing. And someone who's immigrating into a new country and into a new culture becomes a part of that, and they're there for the purpose to make it better, to improve, to support and to make it, flourish. So to be an active participant in a manner that helps to make it better. So, I was listening to the document. In the beginning, it sort of talks about what can we do, and then the end, it's more like a manifesto. So there's the language and the feeling changes in the document. But when I was thinking about the beginning part of it, in terms of anti-colonial resistance. So really that means the deconstruction of Canadian occupation in this territory. So in terms of living in these lands, supporting our colonial resistance, it also means participating in the deconstruction of the colonial system and the occupation in our lands, not to build something on with it. So otherwise, it's just being neighborly pioneers, right? Fuck that shit. We don't need any more of that. And then I was thinking about what the language in there says about Iroquois, and so that's like an anthropological term for our lands, right? Some anthro guys like, oh, well, that's the Iroquois, right? That's the French way of saying the Obemoue, because the English never come up with a term for all of us. They just refer to the Five Nations, but they didn't have the English didn't come up with didn't comprehend that there's a whole language group of people that are together, that are the same, right? We call ourselves Uahume, the original prototype humans in our area. We're the first ones. And then, but in our land, where we call our land, we call that Gonushunimuwe. And that word Iroquois, that's what our language, that's what our word is for. It's the original house that was made, because we have a set of laws, Kanenhariyo, that were passed to us from our ancestors about how you're to live here on these lands, and all the intricacies of our relationships with the natural world, and that to abide by those laws and those way of living ensures that you have the safety and the shelter and the protection of the house that was made, and all of those little rules or agreements and ways to do things are the rafters that hold the house up. And so we say Gonushinimuwe, it's the original house that was made. We're referencing all of our laws that govern the way in which we live, and that we can all be peaceful as a Bahumai, and anyone coming can become part of that with us. And so we wouldn't hold national borders in the same way that other nations did, because we allow there to be a little more fluidity. However, we did maintain nationalities, and they were land associated, but also language associated. So, like when we said the Five Nations, in our language we call that Wiskniyohunjage, Wahadiatororum, the Five Nations, the five lands. This is Wiskniyohunjage. Our word for nation is Yohunjage. It's a land, the country. So, in English, nation means like a group of people, right? You got Red Bull Nation, right? It doesn't mean anything. But a nation state and a country, it does. very few non-Ubahume, like Canadians, want to use that kind of language to talk about Indigenous people, like nations, state, and government, because they perceive it that we don't have those things. And that's partly because they want to fantasize that we're something else, and also that they have a disdain for their own, so they wish that they have a fantasy that we don't have that kind of a way of organizing. But truthfully, we're the ones that made that up. We came up with that ideas.
When you, just as a clarification, when you say Gunashune Unwe, does that just refer to the lands of the 5 nations?
No, it's
or
all
that's all
Ubahume land.
So what would you call the immigrant to those lands that wants to assimilate to your system?
Well, it depends what you mean by that, because what I heard you say assimilate, and then what I heard you read at the end was two different things. You were talking about like non-Indigenous people, like people coming from foreigners coming and wanting to live in our lands in accordance to our laws, but maintain who they are. That's different than coming to live on our lands and be absorbed into us. Both can happen. They're very different things, though. And it also impacts what kind of rights and privileges either party would have.
Can you break that down a little bit? Like
a little bit or all the way?
I'll go all the way then.
So we have varying kinds of relationships with other humans, other people, and what our custom is that it says that anyone can follow the white roots of peace, the roots of the tree, because we use another metaphor for our laws as and our like peacefulness in a great pine tree. And so we describe the roots as being a path to make it to the base of the tree where you find shelter under our laws. And that's our laws create safety mechanisms for human beings, for the people that adhere to it. So we have I believe that the term is a people's republic is the kind of law that we have. And so it's not a democracy, and it's not anarchy, just nothing. It's somewhere in the middle of that, and it's like a republic. So the government has rules, but all the people have rules that they gotta follow, and that's that tree. It's all the rules, and if everybody follows them, then everybody enjoys the shelter from the rules. It provides you with safety, and it gets you out of the wind and the weather. And so everyone has the right to follow those white roots to the base of that tree. In other words, everyone has the right to follow the way of the great law, the Kanenhariyo, and there's opportunity to have some shelter underneath it. So there's a couple ways that can happen. People could choose to accept the Kanenhariyo as their way that they govern themselves, and do that independently of our people. They could do that, but then they would have, by virtue of the nature of our laws, would end up having an allied relationship with us, and to help one another, protect each other. So that could happen, and then people who were to come into our territory and our lands and seek to have refuge, there's a few ways it can go. One is all of them, of course, is that you need to follow our laws, what the rules are, and not to do that is to be in conflict with our nation, right? And then you would be likely found trespassing and kicked out or removed or whatever. So within our territorial laws, there's basically three ways to be able to enjoy the shelter and of our territory. And, one is if your nation has an allied relationship with our nation, and then we have a treaty relationship of trade and commerce, and might be heir of one of the nations that we have a hunting and fishing or harvesting agreement with. So I think I can't remember now, but I want to say there was 31 nations, it might be more than that, that are a part of the Beaver Bowl Treaty, which is an agreement to share land and to share resources in the northern portion of our territory. And in that case, there's a set of protocols and rules. If someone was to come in there that is one of the members of those nations, and you're going to come into an area that maybe it's my people's territory or somebody else's, there's a set of protocols that you're to follow to come and respectively ask where they can go to hunt or fish or to stay for the winter or whatever it is. Like Mississaugas come and ask to do that, so we allow them to come and live in our territory for a little while in Southern Ontario, because they're not from here. So that case, so that in that regarding, those people maintain their own identity, separate, distinct from us. They're not really assimilated, although they are required to follow the rules about what the rules are in our territory. And failure to do so will result in violence and excommunicated and removal of territory. Because in our custom and in our laws, anyone who's not got shelter underneath our laws doesn't have any rights as a human. We don't have a universal human rights. We don't believe in that. So we also don't believe in allowing trespassers to be in our territory. Our laws actually requires their removal or their assimilation, one or the other. So that's one way to be able to be in our territory and spend some time and then leave. It's a come and go kind of thing, and it's generally related to harvesting of a particular crop or whatever, and then returning home. Instead of fighting over the territory and the resource and then having war, the solution is share it. So there's that one. That wouldn't necessarily apply to non-native people that come, unless it's French people or English people, because they are privy to that treaty relationship, and they have some rights associated with it. They're allowed to live in our territory and put a castle up, and they can use the land to the depth of the plow, so they can farm. But they're not allowed to. They don't own it, and they can't mine it, and they're not supposed to cut all the trees down. And I'm not even sure that they're allowed to harvest the fish and deer and elk and stuff. No. So that's another way.
Yeah.
I'm not done talking. Then the next one is where they come as they still maintain their own nationality, but they seek to learn and follow our customs and laws while they're in our land, and they have more safety. They have the rights of to have the shelter of the tree and the shelter of the roof of the tree, the roof of the house protected them. And in those cases, those people they do something they call they hung a name around their neck. They hung a name on them, and in that case it's like a semi-adoption. So some family takes responsibility for them and puts a name on them. So that's the name that everybody should use for them, not their other nation's name. So when they're amongst us, they become a part of that family that took them in, and they have a new name given, and they're to use that name, and they don't have any voice in any of the political happenings of the people at all. None. No voice, but they have the opportunity to have the shelter and the laws like that govern people in terms of like human rights and that sort of stuff applies to them. So no one's allowed to just randomly rape them or kill them or do that sort of things. They got to be treated with lovingfulness and respect and that sort of stuff. But they don't have the right to become a leader of in the nation, or they don't even have a right to have a voice to weigh in on the politics. It's not for them to have. And then the third one I think we talked about was where someone becomes named, they become adopted, and they give up all of their previous nationality, and they completely subscribe to our cultural practice and norm, learn our language and live within our context of our society. And in that case, those people, if they're from somewhere else, they got to become adopted too. And but that adoption is hard, it's firm, it's not temporary, and they're obligated to those people that they're associated with that adopted them. And that client's also associated and is responsible for that. Like it's a two-way street with both adoptions, actually, the permanent one and the non-permanent. And in that case, if they act up, then they still go to that clan family and speak to them and the clan mother to address them. And then if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they might kick them out. And they don't have to charge them with murder or rape or treason to expel them. They can simply be that they're disrupting the people and not listening. And maybe it's because their own culture that they came from before has conflict or whatever, but if they are acting up, they can just simply be the people can come together and make a decision. No, we're not going to tolerate her no more or him no more or whatever, and just kick them out. And so they can do that. There's a little bit of procedures about how that happens, but that's it. And then the last one is when they become adopted and they have a name and they become a part of the people. And in that case, it's hardened. It's a kind of adoption that it's not to be spoke of again. It'll break the peace. So people who become adopted like that, that's it. There's no more talking about it. That's who they are, and that's who they are. Whatever. There's a rust hole. It gets patched, and so it's not visible, right? So you're not supposed to be bringing up all the stuff from where you used to be, your other life, because all the context of that is not in the same landscape. So that's the other one, and then I think that's all of them. The only other one, I guess, is that how it works in terms of generations. So say that first dude comes along and he has the Ford and his big van or big truck, his big boat. I'm looking at that chunk of that boat over there, it's fucking me up a little bit. I need to clarify my thoughts. I lost my train of thought.
I wanted to ask you to clarify. You were saying the English and the French have particular relationships. How do you see the other peoples, whether they're Jews or Muslims or that have like specific types of community or that aren't assimilated within that English or French or European mindset, or say an African population or the Syrians or various different nationalities, the Tamils? Do you see each one of those groups having to figure out its own relationship, or how do you assess that? And also, if you could speak up a little more. A little louder.
I guess that depends on how they got here, right? Because if they came here and pledged allegiance to the Queen and became Queen's subjects, then it don't really matter what their nationality was before or their cultural practice is not relevant. It's they're subjects of the monarchy. So in that case, then they're associated with us the way in which the English are. And in some regard, the way the French have become because of the amalgamation of the French and English and what happened with the kings over there. But, yeah, we have a unique relationship with French Catholics, and so those people, maybe they came to these lands through those people, and so there's that. So I never heard about anybody talking about what that looks like, because it was a French and English government forts, like it was like projects for their own people to live in. So we've not talked about it in an individual sense. So, but it would seem that they have some allowance or there's an opportunity for dialogue to discuss about what that might look like in terms of that relationship. Well, I mean the practical sense of how do you build a fort and where that fort is going to be placed, and its purpose is to defend that land. So people that are going to come to use that as the avenue in, they literally have to establish themselves in a way that's purpose is to defend the land from outside invasion and attack. And in this case, it's Canada. Right? So that's one thing. The other thing to think about, I guess, is how we talk about those people in our language, and we call the French people Saruni, and it's the ones who made knives, the knife makers or the sword makers, and so we culturally identify them as those people, and then we call everyone else Jorha Saga, all the English and all the rest of their subjects Jorha Saga, and that's the people who come from the east, the Easterners. So I guess it all depends on how you arrived in this land. If you came from the east, arriving here on a plane or boat or whatever, and coming, then that's who you would be, Jorha Saga. And then I guess if you came from the west, that'd be really weird, because I don't even know that we have a word for Westerners. I guess that might be Japanese people and some of the Chinese, depending, I guess, how they arrived here.
It seems to me you have this kind of weird situation where the crown has not been upholding its relationship, and where there's all of these subjects of the crown who are now coming from all over the world, but aren't, they're not being taught about the relationship, and they're not here in relationship to you.
Yeah. Those are occupying forces right there. They're actually colonial occupants. They're combatants, and they're resource thieves, and they're I think we call them Canadians most of the time, and they're not really our allies, and they're not really, like people always say, all people in Canada are treaty people, but you can't really be connected to us within that treaty context without having all that other stuff, that relationship. So without that, you're just invaders. Right? Whether good danger or not, it doesn't matter. Oh, I didn't know that I was an invader. Well, it doesn't matter. You're still an invader.
And how can those people change their relationship to you or their status as invaders?
They would have to approach us and seek to live in our territory, and then find out what the nation's response is. And you couldn't just do it with individuals. It had to be taken to the greater nation council for them to discuss it, and then come back with response. And I would suggest or think that the most reasonable way is that it would happen on an individual basis, and it would be by people within our society who are willing to take responsibility for that person's actions or their behavior within our territory. So it would require someone to be assigned responsibility, and whoever that is clan and their clan mother and their chief and the war chief of that or headman of that particular group of people to be all willing to accept and to take that person on for their responsibility, so that if they did something that was irresponsible or inappropriate, first of all they would correct the behavior, and second of all they'd be the ones that would get in trouble for that person's behavior. So it's not just like a group of people could show up saying, hey, we're the Syrians, can we live over here? Because it literally would require each individual building a relationship with someone willing to call them brother or sister. And without that, they don't get to stay. Unless they're coming to be like, we wanna join you somehow. And then in that case, if they want to join as a group, there is ways that can happen as well. That's the people that are landless. And we have a certain name for them. We say them people are, wait a minute. Something like that. It means that they're under the skirt, or they got a skirts on, and they're landless. And those people that are wrapped in a skirt, I don't know why they use that expression. I just know that is how they describe it.
Is that like with the Delaware and the petticoats?
Yeah, and Nanticokes, and there's a few of them. That's how they became part of us, and that's what they refer to them as within us. And so they set within our benches, so they set within our nation. That's like a nation being accepted into our nation. So a group of people that come from a certain particular cultural background could, I guess, in theory, be taken in and given and allowed to have a place to stay and to live within our rules and our Kanenhariyo as people with a skirt within our nation, but they couldn't join to become like the 7th or 8th or 9th nation, because they're landless, and we refer to our nation states as territories, right? So they can't join in the same way. That's why the Mississaugas couldn't join the Confederacy when they asked to join, because they were landless. So we said you can live on our northern hunting grounds, and we call those people Juggernuts, the stink fish people, and they because they're landless, they couldn't join as an equal nation, so they were given the status of like being under the skirt, and they were able to live on our territory and have the freedom and the rights to like not be warred upon, and the Kanenhariyo, they're allowed to use that, and it applies to them and protects them, and that's why they're allowed to live within Kanenhariyo, but it's not all their land. It's not their. And so there's some weird stuff going on right now because of colonization, where you got these people who don't know their own history, and they don't know why they were allowed to live there, that they're actually partners within the Confederacy and associated to one of our nations. And I'm not actually sure who accepted them. I believe it was Onondagas. And that's why when the Mississaugas got relocated out of Toronto, why they ended up at New Credit, where they ended up at Six Nations, because they went there to the people who allowed them to live on these lands in the first place. They're not from here. So that's the same kind of people, right? It's the same kind of situation. They were allowed to maintain who they were, but they never got a full voice at the council. And they don't get to decide about the land. They don't have a voice on the land. So there's people that come like that. They might be allowed to live in an area, but that doesn't become their land, and they don't become a part of that land, and they don't have a voice about the decision, like to go to war on that land or to sell that place, or or to give it to somebody else. They don't have any voice about that. Just if they choose where, if they end up where they're not going to use it anymore, all they can do is inform us that they don't want to use it no more, and we'll find someone else as a purpose for it. Yeah, that's how that works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's leave that
Any
there.
more?
No, that's good for now.